Welcome to episode number 64 of the Fitness Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Mark Torres, and in today's episode, I'm going to be answering some questions I get in my TikTok comments. Before I get into that, I might as well make an announcement and say that effective immediately, the Fitness Hippie Podcast will be exclusively available on... No, I'm just kidding. I wish this podcast would be exclusively available on Spotify because that probably comes with a fat paycheck. But no, so going forward, the Fitness Hippie Podcast will be a bi-weekly podcast. So instead of episodes coming out every single Monday, they'll come out every other Monday. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I'm a TikTok star now. Not really, but I do make 7 TikTok videos a week, amongst other things. You know, all these projects that I'm trying to get into are growing, and they're more time consuming than ever. And obviously the amount of hours in a day don't change. So I've got to try to balance my workload a little bit. So I'm going to cut down on the amount of Fitness Hippie episodes that I do so I have time to do other things and I don't overextend myself. So I think that some of the other projects that I'm going to get into are things that you guys would enjoy. So hopefully the Fitness Hippie Podcast going to bi-weekly is not going to be the end of the world. So the Fitness Hippie Podcast won't stop, but it'll definitely be a little bit further in between episodes, but that is okay. So effective immediately, there will not be a new Fitness Hippie next Monday. It'll be the following Monday after that. So twice a month now instead of once a week, so 4 times a month. But that is the announcement. Let's get into today's show, answering questions from my TikTok comments. Question number 1 is, how often should basketball players do cardio? I usually get on my treadmill every other day for about 30 minutes. So this is a question that I'll answer specifically and also broadly enough to have different applications. So I think whenever you're training for anything specific, the first thing that you have to do is look at the energy demands of the thing that you're training for, whether it be basketball, baseball, soccer, volleyball, golf. It could be something like a Tough Mudder or a Spartan race. Anything that you find yourself training for, you have to understand the energy demands of that thing first, and that'll help you figure out what to train. So I think baseball is the best example of this because there's a lot of standing around in baseball. If you're a hitter and you hit the ball depending on where you hit it, let's say you hit the ball into the gap in left field, and then that gives you enough time to run all the way to third base. You hit a triple. That is the longest burst of energy that you'll have as a hitter, right? Because if you hit a home run, you're trotting around the bases. You're not full out sprinting. If you hit a triple, you're full out sprinting from home base all the way to third plate. All right. Home plate all the way to third base. Holy shit, I played baseball for a lot of years of my life. So that is the biggest amount of sprinting that you'll do. And at the most, that is going to be a minute, give or take, for probably most people. So as a hitter, that's the most running that you'll do. As a fielder, let's say you're playing in right field and a ball gets hit to you. If the ball gets hit to you and you catch it, you might make a little short jog and then you'll catch the ball and the play's over. Maybe the ball gets hit in the gap and you have to chase a little bit. Once you throw it in, the play's over for you as well, unless you have to cover a base or something weird and wonky happens. So maybe in the field, the longest sprint time that you'll have is 30 seconds. So as compared to a bunch of other sports out there, baseball is not a very cardiovascularly demanding sport. That's not to say that overall cardio won't help. It absolutely will. But once you start to realize that most of the running that you'll do are in these short spurts, a minute or 30 seconds, that could be a good telltale sign as to what you should do in the gym. So you should train for good sprints of a minute and 30 seconds. So when it does happen in the game, you're well prepared for that. So that is going to give you a pretty good indication of how you should train. And not to say that everything should be a minute sprint and then 30-second sprint, interval training in that fashion, but you can extend it. Of course, you can do 2 minutes and then a minute, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, right? The more cardiovascularly fit you are, the more ready you are for those sprints in the game while they happen. So of course, if you can train that way, that makes a lot of sense. Versus something like basketball, which is what the specific question was asking about, it is a lot more constant movement. You're kind of going from one side of the court to the other. There's not a lot of standing around as in baseball. If you're standing around in basketball, it's not going to be for a long period of time. You're kind of constantly traveling, going back and forth, back and forth. It's more of a constant cardio. There are bursts of energy. If you have a fast break, if you're making a play at the rim, all these things happen where there are bursts of energy. So there are intervals, let's say, that happen in basketball, but it is definitely a little bit less than something like maybe baseball where it's just sprints. That's it. So that is a good indication of how you should train. So for this particular question, every other day on the treadmill for 30 minutes is a fantastic start. I think once you start to understand, let's say you average 20 minutes of playing time, having 30 minutes of cardio in your bag already and already being accustomed to that is a great start, especially if you're in season. If you can maintain that, that's going to be amazing. That's going to be 10 minutes of extra cardio that you have than you maybe need, but that's good to have. And then as the off season comes around, then you can maybe start to try to expand on that 30 minutes. Maybe you add a minute each week. Maybe you start at 30, but then you go to 31 the next week, then 32, 33, so on and so forth. That 1 minute of extra cardio is not enough to be a detriment on your life immediately. It's not going to make, you'll feel it. You'll feel the extra minute, but it's not a big jump. But over the course of, let's say, 5 weeks, you've added 5 minutes onto your 30 minutes. That might not seem like a lot, but at the end of a game, if you're in the game for the last 2 minutes of the game, that extra 5 minutes of cardio can come in handy. Instead of being gassed at the end of the game, you have that extra cardio reserve because you've been building on your general cardio for a long period of time. That's a great thing to have. That way you have the energy, you have the explosiveness to take the last shot. Whether or not you make it, that's up to you. But yeah, working on general cardio is going to be great for basketball, and then still kind of implementing intervals as you can, because there are some kind of sprint scenarios in basketball. Not as much as other sports, but definitely throw them in there and they'll have a good crossover to basketball. So if you're training for something specific, knowing the energy demands of that specific thing definitely help out and definitely give you a blueprint as to how to train for that thing. Question number 2 is having a refeed day once a week good so I won't slow down my progress in my 12-week cut? So this is a great question. This was in response to a video I made about the importance of maintenance phases. So for those of you who do not know, a refeed day is if you're in the middle of a cut, if you're in the middle of a weight loss period, you might do a refeed, whether it be once a week or once every other week, however you set it up, where you give yourself a little bit of a reprieve from your deficit, a reprieve from your diet that you're currently on. So that might mean you just add a little bit more food, your calories are not as low, or maybe you get to eat some things that you wouldn't normally eat. You're forgoing for that entire diet period. So The Rock has his epic cheat meals on Sundays. That would be his refeed day. So something like that, something where you're in the middle of a cut, but you have like a 1-day break. I think a refeed day is a great concept, but obviously there's a lot of nuance. So if you're a person who is in a 12-week cut, if you're in a deficit that's not super aggressive, it's a pretty small deficit, and you're eating pretty similarly to the way you've been eating the whole time, and you're not really depriving yourself of anything, the need for a refeed is not necessarily there because you've only kind of just slightly cut everything down. So there's probably no need for a refeed. If you're in an aggressive deficit and you're being really strict for an extended period of time for whatever reason, then having that refeed day might give your body a little bit of a break from being in a deficit, which is going to be great. And also the mental break that you get is obviously going to be just as important as anything else. So I think a refeed day is great. The only thing to be conscious of is the fact that if you're trying to lose weight, make sure that your refeed day is not so crazy that you knock yourself out of your overall deficit. You're definitely not going to be in deficit for that day, for the most part, depending on kind of how you set it up. You might be more at maintenance. You might go over a little bit, but that's okay, as long as your overall deficit is still intact. If you have a very small deficit to begin with, let's say you only created 1,000 calorie deficit over the course of the entire week, you can absolutely blow that over in one day, in one sitting. The Rock, his epic cheat meals are so high in calories that if you try to eat like that, you're going to eventually knock yourself out of your deficit for the entire week. You've only created 1,000 calorie deficit. You eat over 1,000 calories, and you completely diminish that deficit that you had. So, the whole point of the refeed day is to give yourself a break from the diet. But if you're completely overriding the diet that you're trying to do in the first place, that's obviously not ideal. And then you end up gaining weight and you get frustrated and the whole thing happens. So if you think a refeed is smart for you, if you want to give your body a little bit of a break, you want to have a day where you kind of enjoy yourself and you can kind of eat some other things that you wouldn't normally eat in your cut, as long as it's not completely fucking over your entire deficit, that's a great thing to do. That is a great thing to implement into your weight loss phase. Last but not least, question number 3. Hey man, would you recommend creatine for someone trying to lose weight while going to the gym? This is another fantastic question. And I think that when it comes to supplements, this might be a future episode that I do all about supplements, but this is a great example of like this melding of concepts, let's say. So when it comes to weight loss, the only thing that matters is the calories. And of course, like if you can have protein there as like your 1B of importance, 1A is calories, 1B is protein, that is your weight loss and that is your body composition. Those are the two factors that are the most important thing. When it comes to creatine doesn't really have an effect on either one of those things. If you are trying to lose weight, the creatine is not going to help or negatively affect your weight loss. So I think that when you're in the gym, what the creatine will do great for you is it'll help you have that little extra push. It'll help you push off fatigue a little bit. It'll help you do a little bit extra work in the gym. And that's a great thing to have, obviously. But that's like, it has nothing to do really with your weight loss. As long as your nutrition is in check, then you can have all the creatine you want on the planet. So this question applies to anything. But like for something like let's say a protein shake has calories, so you have to be kind of careful with that as you go forward. Like it's a substantial enough amount of calories that it could affect your daily caloric intake, and then that's something you have to be cognizant of as you're trying to lose or gain weight. Especially like the mass meal replacement shakes, like the mass gainers, those have a ton of calories. So for any sort of supplement, if there's no like significant caloric impact that it has on your daily calories, then the ingestion of those things doesn't ultimately have a profound impact on your weight as you go forward. So that's not something that you should worry about, but that is a great question. So you should take creatine if you want to lose weight, if you want to have more productive gym sessions. If you don't want to spend the money on it, it's probably not a big deal. But that wraps up this week's episode of the Fitness Hippie Podcast. Remember, no new episode next week. It's going to the week after. The bi-weekly Fitness Hippie Podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you have any questions, hit me up on Instagram at MTEFit. Follow me on TikTok, also at MTEFit. And if you're too lazy to find any of those things, you can always find me on MTEFit.com. Hit the links section, and everything that I've ever done is right there at your fingertips. Hopefully you enjoyed today's show. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.